Shane Riordan, 670 The Score, Second City Prime. Today, we're getting you ready for your Christmas dinner. You cannot mess up a prime rib, and I'm going to show you exactly how easy it is today. We're going to do a prime rib. It's a 6-bone prime from Second City Prime, secondcityprime.com. Promo code Shane10 for 10% off. That gets rid of your sales tax. This is a 6-bone prime rib roast. We are going to detach the bones from the roast itself, and that's going to serve two purposes. We'll get into that when we do it. And then we're also going to do a standard focaccia. I've been resting this or proofing this focaccia dough since last night. So we're going to show you how to make that. And then we're going to carve into this prime rib maybe 4 hours later. Stick around. Okay, here we go. Couple holiday staples for you, courtesy of myself, Shane Riordan, 670 The Score, on behalf of Second City Prime. We're doing this giant bone-in prime rib roast. This is a 6-bone, should feed about 8 to 10 people. I would recommend a pound per person, and if you're doing bone-in, make sure you're factoring in the fact that there are bones there, and that accounts towards the total weight. So it's a pound per person technically, but each person won't get a pound of meat. So if you have a family, a good-sized Midwest family that wants to eat about a pound, go up to 1.5 pounds per person when you're buying your prime rib. First thing we're going to start with is a traditional holiday focaccia roast. I did make a dough from rested dough last night. That is in the oven right now, so we will have a finished focaccia loaf to show you, but I'm going to show you the process here real quick first. Now, when we're working with bread, I like to work in weights and not volumes, right? Especially with bread, like my measuring cups are different than your measuring cups. So I'm going to go in with about 500 grams of bread flour. I went volume on the water. That's okay. About 300 milliliters of water. And it's very important with focaccia that you temp test your water. When we put that yeast in, if the water's too hot, the yeast could be killed. If the water is not cold enough, the yeast won't activate. So I'm looking for somewhere between 100 degrees and 110 degrees, right? So I used warm water from the sink, perfect, 105 degrees. So I'm going to take this water, pour it in my bowl. It's at 105 degrees right now, so I want to work kind of quickly because it will, decrease in temperature. I'm going to take about 2 teaspoons of active dry yeast. Go right in here. Now, the yeast isn't activated until it hits a sugar source. So you could go standard cane sugar, but I am choosing to go the standard honey route. Get a knife over here. So we're going to put about, a couple teaspoons of honey in here to activate the yeast, and then also a little bit of olive oil. So this is about, a couple tablespoons of olive oil. I'm going to whisk that together. And you're going to see, I'll show you the bowl in a second, but you're going to see if your yeast is active and it's alive, your mixture here of the yeast, the sugar source, the hot water, and the olive oil should start to foam a little bit. I'm also going to add some salt in there. Good hefty pinch of salt. So we'll whisk this together, and then I'm going to set it aside, and then in about 4 or 5 minutes, we should start to see some foaming in this liquid mixture to indicate that the yeast is alive. So we'll put that aside over there for right now, and I'm going to start working on the compound butter that we're covering the prime rib in. So I've got some time here. I'm going to start cutting that up a little bit. Just want a real fine mince on the thyme. I prefer fresh over dried, but if you have dried, then use the dried. But if your grocery store does have fresh, I would always lean toward going fresh. So this is a 12-pound prime rib. So I grabbed about 2 good sticks of Kerrygold butter. And again, I'm always going to skew towards the best ingredients possible. If you can't get Kerrygold, then you can't get Kerrygold. Just use the best butter you can find. I'm going to put this thyme in with my butter. And then to spice it up a little bit, I'm going to put in some garlic confit. So it sounds intimidating. It sounds French. But garlic confit is easy. You're going to get as many peeled garlic cloves as you can into a pot, cover it with olive oil, put it in an oven at 300 degrees, 325 degrees, cover it, and let it go for 3 hours. That garlic is going to cook in the oil. going to become incredibly tender. And then you also have a nice garlic oil to use with your toast, to use with steak, whatever, your salads. So I've got all these really nice confit garlic cloves I'm going to put in with my butter. There's some rosemary in there too. And dump in the oil. And then I've got my Second City prime rub, which is like garlic, salt, pepper, pulverized shallot. It's an incredible rub. You can get it on the website. I'm going to throw that in here too, because I did put that on my prime rib roast last night. So I'm going to put some of that in there. That should be good. We're going to mash this up. And then we're going to spread this all over the prime rib. Now, the number one thing that you should be conscious of with your prime rib is not obviously get the best quality you can, and Second City Prime has some great stuff, but you need to take your prime rib out of the fridge and let it let it get to room temperature before you cook. If you put a cold prime rib or a rib roast, if it's a choice cut, in the oven, it's not going to cook evenly. You're going to get all gray on the outsides, and you're not going to get to the center. The center is going to be raw, and the outside is going to be like medium well done. We don't want that. So I had Dustin Rhodes from the morning show take this sucker out of the fridge this morning for me at like 6 a.m., and it's like around 11 right now. So for sure, room temperature, for sure. If you are like more price conscious, I'll tell you right now, Jewel and Mariano's do like 3 prime rib sales a year. They're down to like $5.99 a pound. But it's not prime rib. It's a rib roast. It's a choice cut. And it's not ideal for me. I prefer the prime aspect of it. Oh, I need that. I prefer a prime cut over a choice cut, but that's just my preference. All right. We're not foaming yet. So I'm going to take this compound butter and I'm going to rub it all over this prime rib roast. I set this uncovered in the fridge last night I did it after the show yesterday. So like 6 p.m. I salted it. I did all that shit. But first, we are going to take the ribs themselves off the roast. This is going to do 2 things. It's going to let me season all sides of the rib roast, and it's also going to make it a lot easier when I want to carve this later. So I'm going to find my seam here. I'm going to make a good mark there. And then I'm going to come down and start taking these bones off. Let your knife do the majority of the work, because it's a tough task with a piece of meat this big. So I'm just going to take my knife and run it up against the bones. Go ahead and put the blade of the knife with the bone so you can feel it. And I'm almost through the other side, so I'm going to flip it. And I'm going to find it on this side. Maybe not yet. Just follow the bones all the way through. Kind of like you're filleting a fish. Okay, almost there. We're going to put this back on because we want it to roast on there. Kind of acting as like a stand for us. Okay, almost through. All right, so I've got my bones. That's going to give me the ability, little massacre, that's okay, to season this entire thing. I'm going to save this strip of fat, and later we can render it down, and it's really good beef tallow to cook with. So since I didn't season the underside yesterday, I'm going to do that now. Liberally. This is a big piece of meat. It's going to take a little bit for that flavor to actually penetrate the rib roast itself. So let's get a re-season here. And then also season the underside of your bones, because that's important too, because we're still going to eat this. Still going to eat this part of the beef. As the person who's cooking it, I have to keep this part because I think it's the best part of the roast itself. All right, did a little cleanup here. Compound butter's ready. And a reminder, the butter is good Kerrygold unsalted butter because there's butter in the seasoning. There's salt in the seasoning that I use. So it's the Kerrygold butter. It's the Second City Prime, the rub. It's garlic confit. And then in some thyme, you can use rosemary. You can use sage. You can use whatever herbs you want to use. So I'm just going to take a spatula. And you don't want to go too heavy on it. You just want an even coating across the entire roast on all sides. All sides. So I'm going to start at the top here. If you go too much, then you're just going to end up with a giant smoke fest in your kitchen or wherever. So I'm going to make sure I have enough to cover the entire thing, and then I'll come back and apply some more if I feel like I have to. But again, we took the bones off because we want to season every portion of the rib roast that we're going to taste. Like, we don't want the bones, because we're going to end up cutting the bones off anyway to slice this thing, right? So we don't want that underside of the roast, the portion that the bones are connected to not have any seasoning in it. So that's why we take them off, and then we will reattach them for ease of roasting, and also because it's the best, the bone meat, so the meat closest to the ribs is the best part of the roast, in my opinion. A little bit more, and then also, of course, don't forget the sides. That looks good to me. It is messy. It's kind of unavoidable. You can wear gloves if you want. I'm obviously not. But I'm clean. I shower. All right. So we have that. Wash my hands real quick. And now I'm going to reattach the bone portion, and I'm going to use butcher's twine. Go ahead and tie it back on, and then we'll get to the flour portion of our focaccia. So I'm going to turn this over, get to the underside. Maybe the gloves. It's a personal preference. All right, so this is the exposed portion. I'm going to go right back here. And then I'm going to run my twine underneath and start tying these suckers back on. Okay, we are covered in our compound butter. And reminder, we took the bones off and we seasoned on the underneath, the portion of the prime rib that wouldn't be exposed if we would have left the bones on. And then I tied the bones back on because it'll be easier to then take them off to carve when we're done. Compound butter's on. There are two different ways that people like to roast their prime rib. Don't be afraid of either one of them. That's the purpose of this, to show you that you, the everyday home cook like myself, can easily perfect and make a beautiful prime rib for your family this holiday season. I usually like to do the 500-degree method and then turn it off. So for that method, you would get your oven up to 500 degrees. I'm at like 480 right now, so we're waiting for that. And then per pound, you would roast your prime rib for 5 minutes at 500 and then shut the oven off completely. Under no time constraints, that's what I would do. Today, I am going to roast it 5 minutes per pound, 12 pounds, so an hour at 500. And then I'm just going to bring it down to 275. And then I'm going to wait about 2 hours until this is at, let's say, 110 degrees for my preference, knowing that it's going to rest for a half hour and come up to about 120, 125, a good rare plus to medium rare. Prime rib is not a time-based cook. No matter what, you should have a meat thermometer. You should have a meat thermometer with a probe that you can leave in the oven. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that every oven is the same, and you can put this in at the 500-degree method, and for a 12-pounder, shut it off and wait 2 hours, and you're going to come up to your desired temperature. It's not the case. Not the case with any oven, not the case with this one, no process whatsoever. You have to probe your prime rib so you know exactly what temp it's at so you can remove it when you want to. For me, like I said, 110 degrees, knowing it'll come up about 10-15 to get to a rare plus for me. If you like medium rare, take it out between 120 or 115 and 125. If you like a medium, take it out between 120 and 135. It'll rest, raise 10 to 15 degrees, rest for a half hour, 40-ish minutes. I'm going to take it out at 110 because I like Rare Plus. I don't really care what anyone else here wants to eat it at. This is my prime rib. We're going to bring this in there now, 500 degrees for 5 minutes per pound, 12 pounds. 500 degrees for an hour, kick it down to 275, probe it, and I'm going to wait until it gets up to 110, 111, 112. This goes in now. My suggestion lower rack, get rid of all the racks in there that don't matter. Give yourself as much space as possible. Center this thing so any drippings don't come off. Move it over a little bit. That baby sits there at 500 degrees for an hour. I'll take it out at 1 p.m. Not going to open that door. Otherwise, you're just going to lose all your heat. Let's make the focaccia. All right, focaccia. You can see in there, if you could see in that, see how we kind of have that filmy surface up top? That's the activated yeast. So it did. The yeast is alive. The yeast is alive. It did exactly what we wanted it to. It foamed. So we talked about measuring for bread in terms of weight and not volume. This is all-purpose flour. Preferably for a focaccia, you would use bread flour, which is got more protein in it. Once you do the stretching, it's going to be more glutinous. It's a little more bready. I'm not a baker, but this is about 500 grams of all-purpose flour. Normally, we do about 340 milliliters of water when we did this earlier for bread flour. I used all-purpose, so I need to decrease the amount of water that I use. So I used about 300. So I'm going to go in right now with all my flour, and I'm going to mix until we have just a rough dough. Just use a spatula. Go ahead and scrape down the sides of the bowl. You want all that flour. So a rubber spatula or like a rubber bowl scraper, a plastic bowl scraper. I want a shaggy dough. If you use bread flour, it might be a little wetter. Your dough might be a little wetter, and that's totally fine. It's all going to turn out fine in the end in our different periods of proofing and stretching. So this is step one, right? There are so many different ways that you can make bread, and there are so many different schools of thought. But the way I operate is I'm going to add some oil to this right now, some olive oil, and I'm going to let it rest for about 15 minutes. So I'm going to work this around, let the olive oil coat the outside of the dough. I'm going to let it rest covered under a towel for about 15 minutes. And then I'm going to come back and show you exactly what we do to start stretching out and getting the proteins and the gluten activated in this focaccia loaf. I've got my dough resting right here. We're going to do 2 separate 15-minute rest periods. Then we're going to go into our cookie sheet, our bread pan, use metal, it conducts heat, distributes the heat a little bit better. And then we're going to let that proof for about, hour and a half, and then that will go into a 450-degree oven. So obviously the bread is a process. A lot of people do focaccia overnight, but this recipe that I'm giving you here today is a same-day focaccia, very easy recipe. So that's going to rest, proof for about 15 minutes, come back, stretch it, another 15 into the pan. I made one earlier, special for you. I made one last night and proofed it overnight so we could have an example today. Beautiful. This is what we should be working with. This is a small focaccia loaf. This is a 9x13 pan. And I put that garlic confit and some garlic oil and some herbs and rosemary on top of there. So that's what we're hoping to get with this. And we have that prime rib in the oven. Really good to slice up the focaccia and make yourself a little prime rib sandwich. Maybe we will do that later. So this is what we're hoping to get from that. But I will come back in a second and show you exactly what to do to stretch that focaccia loaf and to get you starting to build the proteins and the gluten. All right, so as you can see, video extraordinaire and editor Kevin Lapka and I already dug into the focaccia. It's incredible. It's awesome. You're going to be able to make it very simply if you just follow my first steps. So it's been 15 minutes. I'm going to do my first stretch, all right? So this is doubled in size from where our dough was at previously. So what you're going to do is you're going to start taking each corner, 1, 2, 3, 4, lift up, stretch, put it over itself. That's it. So I'm going to take this, stretch it out, put it over itself. Turn, take this side, stretch it out, put it over itself. Turn, take this side, stretch it out, put it over itself. And then for the fourth side, do the same thing. And I'm going to flip it over so the smooth side is up. Do a little bit of kneading. Doesn't need it, but it's nice to get those gluten, the gluten activated. And I'm going to cover it again, wait another 15 minutes, come back to that one more time, wait another 15 minutes, then it's going to go into our tray, covered, proof for an hour and a half, and then we'll bake. Okay, we're done. Ended up being done a little bit sooner than I expected. And that's on the importance of probing your meat so you know when it's done and not that you're just coming back to check or assuming that it'll be done after an hour and a half or 2 hours or whatever. So remember, we tied it, we took the bones off and then tied it so we can keep the bones back on. So we're going to cut the bones off right now. Got a nice crust from that compound butter. Very happy with that. Remove our string. And we'll get it ready for carving. Oh. Okay. So it's a 12-pound roast. This is probably about, 8 pounds after shrinkage and the factoring in for the bones. I was always taught the best part of your meat, no matter if it's an individual steak, if it's whatever, is going to be the center. So instead of starting at the edges, which are going to be a little bit more cooked than the center anyway, we're going to go right into the center so we can eat the center first. This rested for probably about a half hour. We're expecting, I'd say it's 130 internal. Let's check the center. 130, 131, 131.4. So that's right about a medium rare. We're happy with that. Oh, like butter. Oh, folks, we love that. Perfect, medium rare. Second City prime rib. That's not a choice cut. That is a prime rib with gorgeous internal marbling, very high fat content, and that's what gives you all this juice. You see people on TikTok and Instagram where they press down and squeeze to show you how juicy it is. Fuck that. You're just getting rid of flavor. You can see how juicy this is. Perfect medium rare. Should make anyone in your house happy. Let's actually try it, though. Cut myself a very small piece. Have a sharp knife, and don't use electric knives. Don't use a serrated knife. Use a very sharp, high-quality Japanese steel knife. My God. Look at this. Kev, can you zoom in on that? Look at that. That's high quality. That's going to make anyone at your holiday dinner so disgustingly happy. I'll do the pull apart for you with the grain. My Lord. It's like butter, brother. My gosh. I can't say enough good things about this roast. I can't say enough good things about Second City Prime. They source the top 2% of all beef in the world, and this is a perfect example as to that. This is incredible. I can't wait to do another one for my family for Christmas, for my friends. Hope you do the same. SecondCityPrime.com. Use promo code Shane10. That'll knock 10% off. They're wonderful people, and as you can see, their shit is legit. This is not fake. This is better than any grocery store that you can latch yourself onto. So thank you for watching. SecondCityPrime.com is where you get this. And then don't be afraid to DM me on Twitter or Instagram. Twitter, Shane_Riordan. Instagram, @Shane's Meat. If you have questions about how I cooked this prime rib. I love you so much.